You got a great voice for radio too. It's got
face made for radio too. Yeah. Welcome, everyone, to the September 2024 edition of The Impact, a sustainable CT podcast. For your edification, your enlightenment, and your entertainment, too. I'm Jim Hunt, Communications Manager at Sustainable CT, so if you're looking for someone to blame for this podcast, well, you can blame me. But remember, this is never a one-way conversation. We always want to hear from you for our edification and enlightenment. Drop us a note, won't you, to info@sustainablecT.org. The Impact is brought to you in part by the Connecticut Green Bank. The Connecticut Green Bank confronts climate change by increasing and accelerating investment into Connecticut's green economy to create more resilient, healthier, and equitable communities, and we are oh so glad they do. Visit them at ctgreenbank.com. Remember, Sustainable CT is independently funded. We don't have a magical rainbow unicorn money tree, no sir. But you can be a Sustainable CT sponsor. Find out how at sustainablect.org. We're celebrating the 5-year anniversary of our Community Match Fund this month, a pioneering initiative that has empowered communities across Connecticut to take meaningful action on sustainability projects that matter most to them. Over the past 5 years, the Community Match Fund, or CMF, has supported more than 340 projects that have attracted over 22,000 individual donors. The program's unique model, which combines small dollar donations through its crowdfunding partner Patronicity with a dollar-for-dollar match from Sustainable CT, has leveraged over $2 million in community investments, resulting in more than $4 million in total impact. This model has not only provided crucial funding, but has also galvanized community members to actively participate in the design, implementation, and success of local projects. So happy birthday, CMF, and huzzah to us! To help us mark the occasion, we've invited a once, and we hope future, Community Match Fund project leader, TJ Clynch, to join us to talk about the CMF and a good deal more. I hope you enjoy it. We're delighted to be joined today by Thomas TJ Clynch. TJ is involved in so many things, it's hard to know where to begin. He's Chief Impact Officer at Civic Mind, a creative agency dedicated to social progress, specializing in corporate citizenship, cause marketing, and community engagement. He's the founder of a revamped Hartford Times, and we certainly want to ask him about that today. And TJ is also the founder of Yoga in Our City, Hartford. And that's reason enough to invite him here today because Yoga in Our City was recently a Sustainable CT Community Match Fund project. And we are celebrating 5 years of Community Match Fund success this month. So we've asked TJ to help us talk about that and his experience working with Sustainable CT as a Community Match Fund partner. Thomas Clynch holds a Master of Public Administration from the University of Connecticut. Go Huskies! And he earned his BS in Business Management from Westfield State. Go Owls! In his before life, he was a public policy fellow at the Connecticut State Commission on Equity and Opportunity, and he was the varsity men's soccer coach at the East Windsor District School. Go Panthers! That's pretty good. TJ, thanks so much for being here. I have a lot of things I want to talk about today, but to start us off, let's talk about us, the Community Match Fund, because it is the Community Match Fund's 5th birthday this month. A pretty big deal to us. Can you tell us about your involvement with the CMF? And was that your first time working with the CMF through the Yoga in Our City?
Oh, hey, well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. The first time I met Sustainable CT was actually in my work with the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council. I was on the board for, 6 or 7 years. Oh. So we were always in the same orbit. So kind of watched you guys get founded. So that was really special. Last year was the first year we've partnered with Sustainable CT directly through Yoga in Our City, where the stars really just aligned with the opportunity, timing, and the critical mass of our own audience for us to work together and have it work out.
It's cool. Tell me, it sounds like an odd question. Maybe it's self-evident, but what is Yoga in Our City? I mean, people just show up at a park and do yoga. What is it?
Yeah. It's funny because we consider ourselves a startup still 12 years later. we are a nonprofit organization that uses the community building power of yoga to build stronger, more compassionate communities.
Okay.
We've evolved from being kind of a public relations effort or a marketing effort. It started because I'd started a yoga studio in downtown Hartford and wanted to bring more people to the actual brick and mortar studio. So we started offering classes out in the park.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it got so popular, it was more popular than the studio itself. So we made this pivot to just start doing parks programming, and then over time converted into a nonprofit. So, the idea evolved during COVID, though, to be more of an equity-based program because, well, meaning that we bring yoga to places that need it the most with a goal to inspire and unite us, right? But our programming and popularity grew during and after the pandemic because of a combination of traditional yoga studios closed and our ability to continue classes outdoors continued. But the new challenge post pandemic has been social anxiety and just really a lack of motivation to leave our homes, right? So our program has started to evolve to try to encourage people to rejoin society, so to speak, and avoid isolation. That kind of that trap of I don't really feel like leaving the house today. So yeah, no, it's been really exciting. People do come. Part of our value proposition is the structure, the professionalism, the standards that we bring. Certainly, the coalition of supporters and sponsors that work with us. It really started with Connecticut actually, and as our primary sponsor, our representing sponsor, but it has evolved to include Mental Health Connecticut, AARP Connecticut, the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors, Equity and Opportunity, the Health Collective, and the Connecticut Parks and Recreation Association. So all of these groups really help us reinforce our message, bring unique expertise, bring unique networks and audiences that kind of build this robust and inclusive programming.
That is very cool that it becomes an opportunity for collaboration with so many other groups with agendas that dovetail with your own. Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason this program works is because of collaboration.
Yeah.
That is the entire business model.
Well, we certainly understand that concept, which we couldn't live without collaboration either. So what did the CMF matching grant allow yoga in our city to do that they might not have otherwise been able to do? What value add did we bring? What did we bring to the party?
Well, it's funny because you certainly immediately think of funding, right? And certainly the funding is important. It's allowed us to increase our season, our city park season, add more classes, bring the program to more places.
Okay.
But the intangible value of it, right? The equally important value of it is we get to engage our current audience in a civic-minded way. Right? Like this is a community building thing. It's not just exercise in the park, right? It's kind of owning that space, kind of showing support for the program in a way that the audience is incentivized with this matching program, right? But it also introduces us by way of kind of being a mini marketing campaign to new people, where some people may have hear about yoga in our city for the first time because of the campaign, which is, kind of equally exciting.
You know what intrigues me about this on many levels, but one of the ways that I'm intrigued by this is the way you emphasize community outreach and community engagement, because that's our emphasis. That's where we're coming from. And I often find myself looking at the projects that the Community Match Fund supports and going, why? What are we doing with that? Why are we here? Why are we in this space? We are dedicated primarily to sustainability, which writ large can include many things. And it's equity, from equity to composting and all sorts of crazy stuff in between. Why yoga? And now, hearing you talk about it now makes perfect sense to me. That sense of community engagement, of empowerment, of socialization, culturalization, especially in communities that lacked it or lacked opportunities for that prior.
Yeah,
that makes total sense to me.
Yeah, so yoga is really kind of an extraordinary vehicle in that everyone can do it, right?
Sure, really? Is that true?
Yeah, it's totally true. From 8 years old to 80 years old, right?
Okay.
You can do it.
Okay.
there's adaptive yoga. So any sort of disability, there's ways to have these modifications around it. So it's really multi-generational in nature, and you can also sustain it over time. And you don't necessarily need a class itself to continue on. So by offering kind of an introduction to yoga and a community in which you're welcomed and can start to learn it, you can also now just bring it back home and you start to share it with your people in your orbit. So, that in itself is really powerful. But then the places we do it is really interesting, right? So when you're in different parks, and this is all stuff I've learned along the way, I didn't know this going into it, right? But there's a different sense of ownership and a different sense of connection to different parks themselves based on different neighborhoods. So no, we're in 26 parks across 7 cities, doing 800 classes throughout the season. And no two parks' marketing strategies, so to speak, are the same. How we reach out in Elizabeth Park in Hartford is very different than how we reach out to even Colt Park in Hartford. Just different populations, different time of day, what will work, what won't work. The type of instructor is different. So there is like this super hyper local civic engagement strategy needed for each park.
Yeah. Now, do you find opportunities? Maybe not. I don't know how this works. You're going to tell me. Do you ever find opportunities to mix that demographic up a little bit so that either instructors or even are able to come up different neighborhoods and bring some cultural cross pollination there, or is that not really the opportunity for it?
Yes, totally. And some of that is kind of geographic in nature, and some of it is kind of demographic in nature. So kind of geographically, we do, especially, our cities aren't major metropolitan cities, right? So you can effectively traverse the community and make your way to a different class on a different day from Bushnell Park to Elizabeth Park.
It's not a parochialism, a balkanization going on.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally. Right. So we do get that cross pollination, and that is the dream, right? Like we want people to be able to go to all the different classes. I would love to, this is all a capacity issue, but be able to cross promote different cities to each other as like different excursions, right? Because there are parks, even down in Bridgeport, that are absolutely, kind of have some stunning views and scenery, right? Sure. So there's that. But the other thing that we've worked really hard at is diversifying our teacher ranks themselves, right? So yoga typically is a luxury commodity. And by being a nonprofit, we've been able to offer more opportunities for what, a program's called the Happy Warrior Teacher Training Program, with an eye on, equity, service, and advocacy, and training teachers in the communities that we're serving, in the neighborhoods we're serving, to lead those communities, which supports participation. But, 70% of yoga teachers are white, trained teachers are white, and 90% are women. So, how our whole model is, how do we kind of diversify those ranks?
Yeah, right.
And we have started to crack that. Last year was our first year. We had our first cohort, and it was really successful. This year coming up, we have we've already got enrollment up to about 25 people, which is, an extraordinary number of new yoga teacher trainees. And they're 90% BIPOC, which is, kind of a testament to our marketing team. I really applaud them for all the work that they've done. And our collaborations, right? Being associated with all these different brands and all these different organizations, whether it's, the Health Collective, for instance, make it inviting of diverse candidates, diverse prospects.
That's great. That's great. Tell me, if in your experience with the Community Match Fund, how do you think we could do it better? Do you have any suggestions? I mean, you're obviously an organization guy. The dynamics of this.
Yeah.
Often.
Well, I think the model itself is really remarkable. I don't want to call it perfect, but it's really remarkable, right? The matching fund is really smart because it incentivizes participation, right, in contributions. But on the other side of it is the ability to measure interest is really important to us as an organization, to know where people are donating. And, the other part of it is the small dollars. We want, 1,000 small dollar donors versus bigger donations,
Sure.
right? From that perspective, you want to know that people really love this. So that's a really great piece of it. And I think the work behind the scenes technically was really seamless, even in year one. The support to be able to get it off the ground, it wasn't administratively tedious, which is 90% of the battle as effectively a startup or a small nonprofit. So it was really, really smooth. And certainly now in year two, it's that much smoother because we know what to do. If I were to offer any sort of critique,
Well, no,
because you
please.
asked,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
no,
This is how we grow.
yeah, no, I mean, just being by virtue of being born out of a public policy think tank, right? The Conference of Municipalities effectively kind of shepherded this. The brand and messaging is really designed by public policy people at the end of the day. And I say this only from my perch of civic mind at the intersection of marketing, communications, and public policy, but more storytelling like this is so needed because, sustainable CT and these initiatives is not about, money or place. It's about the people doing this. It's even about the people donating and the whys, and all of that I know is really time consuming and expensive, but being able to tell these stories and put, some humans behind this work is what makes it move.
Yeah.
So
I hear you. I'm a communications guy. I know exactly.
Here you are. Yeah. Here we are. You're doing it.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you on that whole point. And you're absolutely right. The messaging and really communicating what this is and how it can change lives is really the most important thing. And trying to get it out there.
Internally, we have the same thing, right? And when we talk about yoga in our city, we talk about it from this very high level of cultural placemaking and all the power of community building. But, to have students, participants, talk to us and get those types of testimonials, so to speak, to hear from them and the power of it is why we do it, right? At the end of the day, we're just so wrapped up in the work, some of that gets lost.
Yeah. Now, to attract potential, participants, they've got to be able to have an identity. They have to be able to identify. They have to be able to see themselves in the project leaders who are doing this work and say, oh, I can do that too. These are ideas I can run with. This is something I've always wanted to do. This is an opportunity. I see myself doing this. So it's absolutely essential to do that storytelling and bring in those personalities, real life experiences of how we're doing this. One of the things, I wish we could have more money in the game. We can always do more with more. I like to say.
Right.
And being limited to the dollars that we're able to bring to any one project is a problem. But there's only so many dollars to go around. Look, you're involved in a lot of other things too. Tell us about Civic Mind. What's that all about? What does it do? How does it do it? What's your role there?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I founded Civic Mind back in 2011 in Hartford, and this kind of story I tell about it is I credit my parents and my family for my upbringing and how it was realized is I grew up in a small town in East Windsor where my father was our town's volunteer fire chief. My mom ran the senior center, so I was always very civically engaged, right? So I went to business school and got excited about social enterprise and came to Hartford thinking, all the types of things we did to organize in a small community you can do in the capital city. It's right here. So, I started this model where we're a social enterprise and that our accounting is a social enterprise. We have a for-profit creative agency that does, specializes in that corporate citizenship and cause marketing based work. But then we start these nonprofit ventures. So we reinvest our funding and our staff into running these nonprofits. And it's turned out to be a really effective model in that as our programs grow, they become, our best case studies and our best clients of sorts, right? To show other organizations, hey, this is the type of work that we can do. And, in turn, as they grow, we also grow more capacity to be able to help more people. An example of this would be, as yoga in our city has grown, we've needed dedicated comm staff, right? We need a dedicated social media team. Well, that social media team is now the foundation of this Hartford Times project that we're building. But now we can also offer our clients social media support as well. So we streamline costs for everybody across the board, and effectively have created this ecosystem of partners and clients who are one and the same, oftentimes. So that's essentially the model. And then I went to school for public policy because I have really gotten into, 10 years later, systems change. How can we really address problems at a systemic level? As you know, and using yoga as this example, right? It started off as a very, for lack of better words, superficial public relations, and now the work has deepened into this public policy equity-based space because of this, kind of these new partners and
That's interesting. Takes you on a journey you had not foreseen or even planned for necessarily. That's interesting. You never know. We never really know what's going to affect us. Now something will come in, some people, some event, the progression or evolution of a certain idea will take off, and it's like, oh, Jesus, okay, that's not what I expected. And
yeah, I mean, totally. When you even use the example of sustainable CT, when you started this, did it start with a podcast, right? Or the podcast was a recognized need, and all of a sudden it's born, right? Yeah. We'll figure out how to make it work. So
make it work. Well, that's interesting. And indulge me a moment, because I was thinking about this morning when I was thinking about I was going to be talking to you. And I also then try to follow my train of thought. Also thought about my own experience in civic engagement over the years. And I'm an old guy. I go back way a long time, doing a lot of different things. And I'm fascinated by the psychology of leadership. I mean, the notion that, let's take as an example, the Hartford Times. I talk about that. Now, you're not a journalism major. You're not somebody who comes from newspapers, right? But you have this, for lack of a better expression, this kind of audacity. You don't know you can't do it. Nobody's told you. You don't have this sense of limitation. You have a sense of possibility, and you're willing to go out there and put yourself out there to take on a lot of these projects. It seemed like to a lot of us humans, wow, that takes a lot of chutzpah. Where do you find that? Where do you find that sense of that personal conviction, strength of that conviction to be able to go out and say, I can do this. I can do this. I can lead this. People will follow. People will come to this. Where does that come from? And you talked briefly about your parents and your upbringing. Is it that really?
Yeah. I really appreciate, that's a really generous interpretation. I appreciate that.
Well, I kind of see myself a little bit there, so I'm trying to.
Yeah. Well, I do look at it as, I'm figuring it out loud. I don't really worry about failing because I don't try and take on more than I can, and I learn along the way. I'm very patient in building these things because I prefer to not do anything than do something wrong. But what I think guides me the most is just the clarity of purpose of why I'm doing it.
Okay.
I know what I want to see happen, and I won't do anything. I won't take a step forward until I know it's moving in that direction. So, with yoga was really interesting because we started one day a week as kind of the example there, right? We started off in Bushnell Park, and then we did a really robust kind of pilot program across the city where we went to, it was like 9 or 10 parks at random times to see what would stick, and then honed that one schedule, then scaled it to 4 other cities in a smaller version, in a smaller pilot. So right now, Hartford is 7 days a week from May to October with, an eye on indoor classes in the off season. Wow. But Bridgeport or Waterbury, who are newer cities, are 4 or 5 days a week, and building the audience. So there's a different level of maturation across the cities, and they kind of all grow together.
Sure.
With the Hartford Times, one of the things we've done is one of our information models here is we're describing it as a media collaborative, and the idea that we want to bring in thought leaders to share their ideas as a foundation of this content. And we created this initial model, and then we brought in a few different, thought leaders we knew of, in particular the Nonprofit Alliance, and ran it by them as like, hey, here's this pitch. and give us your honest feedback. And they kind of tore it down to the studs and said, this is what we love about it. This is what we don't like about it.
That's interesting. Okay.
Right. And come back to us with this other version. Right. And so we've been able to workshop these ideas in real time, while also kind of publishing what is happening as a general proof of concept on the site to show new people as well. So, we're always kind of adapting and we call it innovating, but you're just kind of pivoting to what works.
Yeah.
I don't know if
it's good. It's also good counsel to hear that you're not trapped in your own echo chamber. You're not listening to your own, you're not convinced by your own press, so to speak. You're going out and finding other people to critique your ideas, collaborate with you, give you, input, maybe change the game. And you never, being open to that is really important. I mean, I've been trapped, I admit, occasionally by my own self-righteousness. So I'm going to go do this thing, and I know it's absolutely right. And if you don't understand it, that's your problem. And, I've made that mistake.
Yeah.
It's a human thing to do.
Yeah. I do think a healthy dose of self-righteousness is important, right? You need to, it is important, right? And for me, what my kind of turning point was finding this North Star in the work of the Connecticut's Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity, and that team and what they were trying to accomplish, right?
Really? Okay.
To give them a plug and to introduce their work. If you don't know, they're a nonpartisan commission of the legislature that, advises the office of the governor and the legislature on all issues for underrepresented communities and populations, right? Yeah. And the clarity that they had about their work, and really kind of this thanklessness of just the grind behind the scenes, and just witnessing it, being a part of it, and ultimately how I came at the other side of it was understanding, and this is really where my social enterprise model was born, and having this nonprofit that is solely focused on equity and opportunity. So every project I'm working on is run through that lens first, and the idea of equity and opportunity as the foundation of civic engagement.
Right. We absolutely are with you on that. I mean, our first and only required action in certification is optimizing equity, and there are different elements that the towns, communities have to bring to that whole concept. So that's from the get-go, and it's changed. And what people think equity is a little different too to different people. And you got to try to bring people along. A lot of times you got to bring more understanding to some of these communities. Obviously, you're developing a moral compass, again, for lack of a better expression, guiding star principle, where there can be a whole lot of stuff going on. Opportunities will come and go, but as long as you have a sense of personal conviction, a guiding star, a moral compass, call it what you will, that certainly makes sense.
Yeah, it makes decision making becomes crystal clear.
Yeah,
that's the number
easier.
Thing,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I hear that. Let's take a break. Second, we'll come right back, and we'll talk about other things. We'll return to our program in just a moment. You've been listening to The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. Hey, while you're out there tripping the web fantastic, don't forget to join us on Facebook for some fun and interesting stuff. Guaranteed safe for children and pets. Come on, be our friend, won't you? At facebook.com/sustainableCT. And we, like millions of others, have hopped on the Instagram Threads bandwagon at instagram.com/sustainableCT and threads.net@sustainableCT. And yes, of course, we're LinkedIn. Search for Sustainable CT from your LinkedIn page, and you'll find us right there, being all LinkedIn and media social. And if you're not yet a subscriber to Actions of Impact, the Sustainable CT newsletter, you could be missing out on some very important information to you, to your organization, and to your town. Accept no substitutes. Do yourself a favor and subscribe today. And you can do that where? At sustainablect.org, of course. And it's time, yes, it's time to save the date. That's right. Mark it on your calendars, folks. The 2024 Sustainable CT Awards celebration will be on Wednesday, November 13th. We'll be honoring all of our 2024 certified towns and brand new cohort of climate leaders. We'll also be celebrating 5 years of community match fund success. That's right, 5 years. Holy mackerel, where does the time go? And what is very cool is that we'll be doing all this at the Katharine Hepburn Cultural Arts Center, the Kate, in Old Saybrook. The Katharine Hepburn Cultural Arts Center is a nonprofit performing arts organization located in an historic theater town hall on Main Street in Old Saybrook. Originally opened in 1911, the building is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Katharine Hepburn Museum, located on the first floor, is the only museum of its kind honoring Katharine Hepburn, Old Saybrook's most celebrated resident. Exhibits feature costume and personal wardrobe items, photographs, home movies, awards, and other memorabilia. How do you beat that, really? Space is limited, so we encourage you to register early at where else? sustainablect.org. Your hard work and continuing support are of vital importance to us, so we look forward to seeing you at the Kate in Old Saybrook on November 13th. Okay, we are back, and we're talking to TJ Clynch about many things. And let's talk a bit more about the Hartford Times. Tell us a little bit more about that. How is it going? Where are you taking it to? What do you hope to do with it? It's a legacy title that, some old timers are still familiar with. So they're going to have expectations. You're going to have to beat those expectations, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? Well, I was really, this is a kind of a lucky entrepreneurial story in that back in 2014, 2015, I was really disappointed generally with the coverage of Hartford. As someone who was championing the city, I didn't feel like coverage from various sources just wasn't serving anybody particularly well. There was just something missing. I couldn't put my finger on it. So I wanted to do something in the media space, and doing homework around the city, I learned about the Hartford Times, and nobody really owned it anymore.
Yeah.
It just didn't really exist.
Wild,
so,
huh?
Really wild. So I started doing some homework around like, where do the trademarks live? Who's got the intellectual property, all of that. And I tracked it all down, organized it, and acquired it with this vision of like, let's figure this next thing out, right? Like, what could this next thing be? And then UConn bought the building, the old headquarters, which, really certainly changed the trajectory of how I was thinking about it, because all of a sudden, I was probably 26, 27 years old at the time, thinking about the foundation of what this platform could be. All of a sudden, that thought process is different. So that really made me start thinking about, what if there was a version of news and information that was rooted in public education, rooted in a trusted source like that? So it's kind of been a journey of that. The other major twist in the story is certainly the Trump administration, where, media became... And, we don't have to go down
public enemy number one. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. So as I was thinking through even the business structure of it, that experience made it firmly a nonprofit, because you have to rebuild trust. And now we're in the place of thinking through, how is information produced itself, right? Who produces it? So we're trying to create this mosaic of lived experiences and more professional expertise to have a community-driven narrative, right? Not for nothing, the Hartford Courant, who in theory is its historical rival, right? The Hartford Courant was the morning paper, the Times was the afternoon paper, has since gone by the way of corporate media ownership, absentee ownership of a hedge fund, right? So certainly their orientation, their orientation, their goals are very different than ours. Meanwhile, content creation generally is obviously changed. So, we're trying to serve as a place, a place to convene, kind of bringing in, the professional thought leadership from subject matter experts, but also reinforcing what they're advocating for with stories of lived experiences of people these issues are affecting. Certainly the challenge with all of this is another very collaborative thing, right? We're starting to work with the University of Hartford a little bit and their students. We're really excited about that. It's plugging along. We do want to be, how we're describing ourselves, it's landing really well, is the Hartford Business Journal for nonprofits. We want to be able to tell these stories and tell the stories of the important work that's being done with the limited resources that we all have.
Yeah. Now, has UConn offered any help or collaboration on from their end, or have they just been, I don't know, a player out there in the universe because they own the building?
Yeah, it's
I don't
hard to
want to put you on the
describe our,
spot for
yeah,
the
yeah. I'm also unsure about the relationship. I am hopeful that we can kind of come together in a really meaningful way, but I have not received any sort of endorsement whatsoever.
Yeah.
I do think, and this would be my kind of candid assessment around it. Our goal is to be the champion reform advocate of the people. We are a budding nonprofit. We are, a very new thing. They are an institutional brand. So there's a major bridge of trust that needs to be crossed and built, right?
Sure.
And so I certainly respect, and they obviously have their own priorities, but communications for them is paramount. So I think what I would suspect is they're watching what we do from afar and will engage us when they're ready.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, of course, because they're as an institution, you'd think they'd have every interest in having an outlet or an opportunity for their students and their academic program to be involved with something like this, to be associated with it, to really use it as an opportunity for learning. At the same time, I can tell you from my experience working with large university systems, they all want to control it.
Yeah.
That whole control issue is huge, and I understand. I get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still very much a small fish in that big pond. So.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, let me ask you, from your perspective, then, being so involved in so many areas around the state, what do you consider to be some of the biggest challenges we face in Connecticut today? I know it's a broad question, but are they? I guess I'm interested to know. Do you think the challenges in Connecticut are primarily political, economic, environmental, or is it a combination of all those things? And what approaches we can take to meet them? I mean, our angle is always from a sustainability point of view. But again, our concept of sustainability is very broad brush. It involves a lot of different stuff. It's not just going green or saving energy, though that is a part of it, or saving the planet, though that is a part of it. It really goes across community engagement and community empowerment and equity, all those elements that I think are really constant challenges in a place like Connecticut, where the disparity of wealth is so great. How do you view the Connecticut milieu today, and what do you think are the biggest challenges, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we could dedicate a whole show to this.
Absolutely.
Right. But, certainly we have the second largest wealth gap in the country.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. The gap between the 99% and the 1% is way too wide. So much of Connecticut is living in poverty. Our incarceration rate is way too high. I think there's something to be said for the fact that we do have a one-party stranglehold on the state is not opportune for a ripe democracy. So there's a lot of that. And for being so blue, we should be way more progressive. We could. The wonderful thing about Connecticut is that you can do things here at a statewide level really quickly. You can make your dent in our little tiny corner of the world.
The scale is accessible. Yeah.
It's totally accessible. And the state's reputation is so strong, right? We're fiscally conservative, but, socially progressive. So we identify that there's problems. And if you could put together a business plan, we'll fund it, kind of in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so much opportunity here, right? And in a way to scale solutions, we can be so much more innovative. Yet the startup culture here is still really, really something to be desired there. The support for entrepreneurship, small businesses generally is not strong enough. Policies, I think we could go way left on a lot of policies to protect, just all of our rights generally. We could be more innovative with public policy is maybe a better way to frame that. we could be more collaborative generally, right? We're 169 towns that, hate the idea of county government,
Right.
But and I'll, what I'll say just from my kind of experience and my early, kind of early memories around this shaping me was working in these volunteer fire departments and these emergency services in small towns, and the concept of mutual aid, the concept of collaboration and working together. Growing up in a volunteer firehouse was really interesting because you could organize a group of random people to run into a burning building together for free.
Isn't that
right?
Something?
With enough affinity, right, and enough leadership, you could do that.
Yeah.
And we could do that with any of the problems that face Connecticut. There's enough brain power. There's enough money. There's enough to make it happen.
That is a really interesting analogy. I love that. Yeah. I'm going to use that and steal that from you at some point.
Yeah, and maybe that goes back to answering the question of, where do you get the gumption to try these things, right? That is really the environment I grew up with.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought it was normal, and it's just not that normal,
Right. One thing you mentioned was the essentially stranglehold. I don't know what the word you used was, but the stranglehold of one party system in Connecticut. The alternative seems really scary and off-putting to me in terms of the current other party.
Yeah. Right.
That said, is there a way to bring either ranked choice voting or some proportional representation, something that will allow for greater diversity in our political system? Is there what's the approach that you think might actually work?
Well, I do agree with ranked choice voting. I do think that's a great idea, right? Anything that makes things more democratic is positive.
Right.
But there has to be, and this is a bit Pollyannish, but there has to be will to want to have more equitable distribution of power. And obviously it is what it is. But, what does that even look like? So my fundamental view around equity is probably a little bit more radical in the sense that nobody just gives up power. You have to take it, so asking for equity does not work. Right. You have to find ways to get it yourself and chip away at it. So yeah, no, I do agree. Ranked choice voting is a great solution. I know Oz Griebel, who was a really great leader, was leading that charge. I don't know who's picked up the mantle, but I would love to see somebody do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking for solutions. I certainly complain enough about different things in a given day, but I try to bring some idea to do something about the issues we're facing, whether it's, the garbage crisis in Connecticut. One of the things that to me, power turns on money. And it's the old, maybe it's my adolescent Marxism coming back to haunt me. I don't know. It's this notion that, if you follow the money in almost any given situation, that's where the motives lie. That's where people are, like you say, people don't give up power. They don't give up, they don't really give up money. Some small portions here and there to look good or to, take something off their taxes, et cetera, but actually sharing that wealth in an equitable fashion, I think, is really difficult. And that brings me to, there's a slim connection, but a real one, if you follow me, of keeping our kids in the state. Do you notice that a lot of our graduates are leaving because they can't afford to live here? They can't afford the housing. They don't see necessarily a future in Connecticut because of the cost of living. Is that an issue, you think?
Well, I think we all have this, especially younger, right? The grass is greener challenge, right? Where should I go? Where's the opportunity? Wanting a change of scenery.
Sure.
I think something that people take for granted in Connecticut is the things that our taxes do pay for, right? Like our healthcare system is really remarkable here. It's what you've grown up in. You don't realize that it's worse in other places, right? Our roads are really great compared to other places.
Yeah.
My father always said, kind of growing up, I love living in Connecticut because, I'm 20 minutes away from a hospital if I ever had a heart attack. And that is not the same for a lot, right? Like, you'll be reached with high quality care quickly, right? we have things like Lifestar, and these are all really like well-oiled machines that I think we do take for granted.
No, I don't mean to challenge. It's just I think one of the things that troubles me the most about there's a mindset, and maybe it's a legacy of the old, white patrician model where that filters down into things like housing. These towns are zoned for family housing. Nobody wants to have multiple family housing which only drives up the cost of housing. And it also doesn't really fit the desires and wishes of a younger generation that want to live an urban experience, that want to have that, that experience living in an urban environment. There's something to be said for the tree-lined streets of suburbia, sure, okay, but that's an old model that is not serving us anymore, and we've got to be able to change that mindset a little bit. But once you allow for multiple housing development, well, now you let the wrong kind of people in. We don't want those people living in our neighborhoods. It's like, Jesus.
Well, I'll flip this on its head a little bit, because I do think what young people recognize about Connecticut is our social values are really strong here. You are, safe in Connecticut, largely safer, we'll say. And what actually concerns me more is the flight of retirees out of the state. And the reason why is
okay.
Yeah, we have so many, whether it's public sector or private, but, really, really important is public sector who, take their pensions and run and spend that money in other states. How can we incentivize, especially public sector employees who build the life in Connecticut, to want to stay in Connecticut, to be an attractive place for them to stay here, that they've given their lives to public service? How do they not still feel connected, that they want to continue to be here and invest in here and see the future here? Because the weather here is, everybody loves the season, and as much as people go down to North Carolina and Florida, right? But like, do you really want to be in Florida? Really? And so that if I were to focus on anything, I'd love to see more policy around incentivizing retirees staying here.
Yeah, keeping some more or less institutional memory so that we can actually benefit from the experience a bit more. Yeah,
and we're an old state, right? I think we have like the third oldest population in the country. So
it's aging.
For me, as much as there's a housing movement for young people, if you think about it really holistically, there's a lot of aging people who could use smaller but maybe luxury and high-end amenities to be invested, right?
Or its proximity to services, all of that.
Yeah, and we're gonna need a push of caregivers. There's gonna be a major need for that in Connecticut.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. You're obviously a very a positive guy. You feel confident. You want to go out. You want to change things. You feel as if you can do kind of spirit. What keeps you positive?
I do have what I described to my team, or they described to me, as delirious optimism, around this, right? I do feel like kind of a master of my own destiny of sorts, and kind of my ability to problem solve and pivot, right? My willing to
the alternative sucks.
Yeah. And, I'm not gonna act like I have not had my eye out the window to greener pastures myself at various times, but, it's always been better to stay and keep going. And then there's just kind of the kind of more external forces that you see. I'm a huge fan of the United States women's national team.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're like, that's, for me, seeing social progress at that level is really exciting.
Yeah. Talk about it. Yeah. And that's not to go down another rabbit hole here, but that was, for me, it was born in the '99 women's team, right? And that was very Connecticut based, with the coach being based here in Wethersfield, and Christine Lilly being from Connecticut. And now you see Alyssa Nair from Bridgeport, and seeing that point A to point B, really dating myself here, but like seeing that thread and Connecticut in it is really cool. But yeah, I think
there's way more to be excited about in Connecticut than there is to be upset about, right? We have a lot of room for improvement. I wish we smashed this land of steady habits moniker in a million pieces. It does so much harm to us.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other efforts, right? I will say that the continuity of even the Lamont administration and having kind of a steady hand on the wheel that, for politics removed, right? It's been steady in Connecticut for a while, right? You don't worry about any sort of extremism in either direction. So you feel like, the ground underneath you isn't moving as you're trying to move forward. And so I think some more messaging around some of that is helpful. So,
Well, how do you handle failure? What happens? I mean, we point to a lot of successes in what you're doing, and that's all well and good, and it's great. We all have our failures. We all have our days when that something didn't work out. Is it just a learning experience? Is it something that you try to turn into a positive element, or no?
Yeah, I guess I don't really view anything as failure.
There you go.
It's right. It's just kind of things just don't work out sometimes because you made a mistake, and sometimes just things don't work out, right?
Yeah.
You have to. I think about the yoga studios that closed during COVID. It's not their fault that their studios closed. That wasn't failure.
Right.
Certainly they may feel it. I've been in that position before. You feel like it's failure, but it turns into something new, right? Something new is born out of each of these things that you recover from and makes better, right? That I use, yoga is probably the best example for me. I've kind of really lived out loud on that with starting a studio, closing a studio, being in parks, going through COVID, starting teacher training. Like all of it has been kind of a hamster wheel of sorts.
Yeah.
But we did worry, our first teacher training, we worried we wouldn't get enough students, right? We worried about these things. Will this work out? Will people like this? And here we are 2 years later, and we're like, of course it worked. Of course it worked.
Yeah. Well, if you don't fail, you're not trying hard enough, I suppose. I mean, it's always got to be pushing that envelope a little bit to see see what you can do and test your mettle and see how something new and different you can try that maybe you haven't been trying before.
My favorite quote is from Jim Lovell, and it's we live in a world where man has walked on the moon, and it's not a miracle. We just decided to go, and I think that's such a cool way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Because nothing I want to do is like going to the moon, but so it makes it more reachable.
Right. Well, TJ, we are out of time. Believe it or not, see these things they just zoom right by. There you go. That's what happened. And I've had a lot of fun, so I really appreciate it. Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. Let's stay in touch. We'll catch up again. We'll do some stuff. We'll definitely want to go down that collaboration path and see where it takes us. So appreciate your being here.
Yeah, this was really wonderful. Thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. As always, this program is recorded, produced, and copyrighted, by Sustainable CT. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, the Connecticut Green Bank. Thanks again to our good friend TJ Clynch for everything he does to make Connecticut a better place. And thanks to everyone for taking local actions that have a statewide impact.